The difference between traditional libraries and digital libraries can be simply summed up as paper versus bits. What follows is the first in a series of short media pieces contributed by members of the Fedora community that will illustrate some of the new opportunities Fedora is creating for institutions and their users. This first piece presents 4 examples of digital libraries and collections. The second piece will focus on open access publishing and e-science, and the final piece will look into Fedora community activities around archiving and information sustainability. As we all know, information in a traditional library is delivered as bound sheets of paper in buildings that are sometimes open. Information in digital libraries, however, is created, packaged, and repackaged from many different digital sources and is delivered in several ways: websites, downloads, software, datasets, media, lesson plans, and so on, all the time. How do you make it possible to store, find, and deliver a huge amount of information in all kinds of formats while materials are constantly morphing? Many national and international digital library projects have settled on Fedora as the answer. Why? Because Fedora enables the flexible and natural organization and display of collections while also supporting their preservation into the future.
I'm Sarah Marcus from the Chicago History Museum.
And I'm Bill Parad from Northwestern University.
Work on the Encyclopedia of Chicago began in the early 1990s. From the beginning, the editor's goal was to create 2 versions of the encyclopedia, a print version which was published in 2004, and an electronic or online version which was launched in May 2005. Such a significant project depended upon the collaboration of 4 institutions: the Chicago History Museum, Newberry Library, University of Chicago Press, and Northwestern University. The resulting Electronic Encyclopedia of Chicago contains a wealth of materials, including text entries, maps, timelines, and a variety of different types of primary sources from dozens of different repositories.
We used Fedora as a publishing framework for the encyclopedia. Fedora allowed us to organize and express this rich diversity of content metadata through well-structured content models and interfaces. It also accommodated integration with the existing databases and workflows at Chicago History Museum. With Fedora, we were able to simplify consistent access for the developers without having to ask content providers to change the way they work.
The structure of every page of the encyclopedia allows users to create their own pathway through the materials. But while the encyclopedia allows for individualized exploration, it also provides guidance for these explorations, both in terms of its analysis as well as the list of specific links which guide users to read more about things they might not be familiar to them.
See alsos and historical sources are examples of Fedora disseminator methods that all objects in the encyclopedia support, regardless of their content type. This made it simple for the broader encyclopedia interface to accommodate heterogeneous content while allowing specific types of content to express themselves as needed.
The tools available for examining images also allows users to shape their own experience. For example, many people might use the zoom function to look at the faces of the protesters in this photograph to bring this historical event to life. But in at least one instance, when I was showing this photograph to a group of high school students, one student took the mouse and focused on a pair of shoes. She explained that she was interested in fashion and the history of fashion. Her use of the image made perfect sense given her particular interests. The encyclopedia contains several special features, one of which is the Labor Unrest Rich Map, which focuses on labor protest in Chicago during the week before the Haymarket riot in May 1886. This map appears in the print version of the encyclopedia, but when we put it online, we decided to bring it to life to allow users to explore and investigate the map, as well as the sources that we used to make the map in the first place.
This was a really fun item to create in Fedora. In addition to the Fedora disseminators that every object supports, we created disseminators with specific semantics for images, books, galleries, and maps. What is especially interesting about the rich maps is that they fall into several semantic categories, and so support multiple such disseminators. They are accessible as images in exactly the same way as other images in the encyclopedia. Because they also contain multiple essays, they also behave as books. And being maps, they support image semantics with geographic parameters. Geographic semantics allow us to link multiple historical maps.
Another type of special feature is the interpretive digital essay. One of these interpretive essays, developed by Carl Smith of Northwestern University, focuses on the 1909 Plan of Chicago.
This is an extensive essay, and the pages were laid out by hand. The page designers used Fedora image disseminators to indicate the exact crop and size needed for each image on the page. These essays draw materials from throughout the archive and contextualize them within a particular narrative. This usually means images are presented with special captions or are cropped from the original item. We used Fedora to clone derivative objects for this purpose. It became very easy for us to repurpose content for specific contexts in this way. The derivatives behave like any other objects in the repository. In this case, Carl has cropped an image from a page from the Plan of Chicago. Another example of repurposing materials and recontextualizing them is in the form of galleries. And here, Carl collected a set of images for a particular point and added his own captions in the form of a gallery. Gallery became an important model throughout the encyclopedia, which we used elsewhere. It became very easy to aggregate materials in the form of galleries and present them to the user as needed throughout the encyclopedia. Another important model was that of the book. This is the Plan of Chicago, 250 some pages, that uses the image semantics to support zooming of each page, but also supports book semantics for navigation, both as a table of contents, as a hierarchy, as well as linear access across the top. And here we can remove the table of contents to use the screen for the image, back out to see the page as a whole. The book model made it very easy for us to add books and bound volumes to the encyclopedia. This is an example of another gallery used in the encyclopedia, supporting image semantics as well as aggregate semantics for galleries and collections. Images, maps, books, essays, and galleries are all examples of Fedora models we created for the encyclopedia. Using Fedora helped us bring order to the evolving task of publishing both familiar and emergent content types.
As we look ahead to version 2 of the encyclopedia, we anticipate expanding, adapting, and creating new components, including an exploration of historical change in neighborhoods, focusing a tight lens on individual street corners, as well as a much broader focus on global Chicago, from the 18th century fur trade to the present.
Hello, I'm Carol Minton Morris, Communications Director for the National Science Digital Library. Founded by the National Science Foundation in 2000 as its online library of exemplary resources for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education and research, NSDL offers an organized point of access to a wealth of online educational resources and services. The NSDL data repository, based on Fedora, connects end users with over 2.5 million digital resources that promote active, inquiry-based teaching and learning. Over 3 million users spent 30 minutes or more at the NSDL main portal and at related discipline-specific pathway websites during the last year. NSDL visitors looked for resources, participated in web seminars, downloaded publications and materials, and blogged to ask questions and investigate interdisciplinary educational and scientific ideas. Fedora has made it possible for NSDL to create an online environment of context and resource contribution with tools like Expert Voices, an open-source blogging system based on WordPress. Users can add both resources and information about those resources to the NSDL Fedora-based data repository through their blog posts. Plugins to the NSDL data repository add context to existing library resources, as well as adding new resources to the Expert Voices collection. The small NSDL logos in blogs indicate that bloggers have elected to add new content by creating links to resource records in the NSDL data repository as a way of giving readers additional rich information about their ideas. Plans for the future include releasing an open-source software package for educational digital library builders that includes these open-source tools. The NSDL Fedora-based data repository API will be bundled with open-source wiki and blog plugins designed to enable a new kind of dynamic digital library with built-in tools for empowering users as contributors. In another example of leveraging freely available web tools to provide novel user services with Fedora, Robert Chavez, Tufts University Digital Repository Manager, has developed a prototype implementation of a time and space browser of repository resources. Chavez discovered that Fedora can disseminate repository content in a way that Google Earth can use. He says, "Fedora allows us to model and manage data in such a way that we can use familiar tools such as Google Earth to access and provide context for loads of Fedora-managed data. The next steps are to use the same tools to aggregate data temporarily, manipulate the data, and push it back to Fedora." Chavez uses Fedora to manage all digital content for the Tufts University Library Digital Collections and Archives that includes the Perseus Digital Humanities Project.
The University of Virginia Library began development of its digital collections repository in 2003, immediately following the release of Fedora 1.0. The repository currently includes electronic texts, both developed from the library's physical collections and licensed from vendors, digital images that have been created from the library's collections, come from faculty projects that have been licensed from vendors or that have been acquired from other institutions, and finding aids that represent the archival collections from the small special collections library. Work is also underway to add additional formats in the near future, including printed music, digital video, digital audio, data sets, and GIS. Users can discover the collections by searching each of the individual formats, but the most expeditious way is to use the cross-collection catalog search, which will present results from finding aids, electronic texts, and digital images as seen by the icons that accompany the search results. If a researcher is interested in images of the Jamestown settlement, clicking on that search result will take the user to an object representing the settlement at Jamestown, but accompanied by 15 images, which might include colonial-era site plans or drawings, aerial views, images of the reconstructed settlement, or maps of the archaeological excavations. If the researcher is interested in the images that they have found through this search, they can begin to build a personal collection using the library's Collectus Digital Object Collector tool. This tool can be used to gather and organize objects from the repository and use them to create slideshows for use in instruction or in scholarly presentations, or to generate websites as you might for an electronic image reserve. Fedora has become vital to the creation of this repository in a number of ways. First, its architecture and its architectural toolkit allowed us to create the architecture for our objects and repository, as well as the content models that work best for our collections, rather than altering our collections to fit the requirements of a tool. As well, the atomistic model that we have developed for our objects, where one object might represent a work or site, and it has child objects that represent the media that are related to it, as well as on a higher level, collections, such as this collection of aerial photographs, have allowed us to create very granular access controls, whereby one image might be publicly available, one image might be restricted to the university, and one image might be restricted to a subset of members at the university. This also allows us to create a common user experience for the entire collection by developing and defining commonly understood activities, such as shown here, previews of objects, where for an image a preview is a thumbnail and for a text a preview is the title. In this way, a common user experience for the entire collection, regardless of format, can be developed, and the tools can incorporate this common user experience. As well, the university is using Fedora to develop a number of other user services. For example, we're developing on-demand digitization where faculty can walk in with materials to be digitized, and once those materials are digitized, a Fedora repository will be used for them to retrieve their objects. As well, the university has developed a page comber tool to collect images off the general web, such as this search here in Google Images for Jamestown, where the page comber tool can be used to select and collect images, adding them into a personal collection alongside images or texts from the managed repository.